Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Yaritza and I am a former classroom teacher, and in today's short video, I'm going to be walking you through my most recent updated teacher resume, and this resume allowed me to get a new position, so I'll be sharing my formatting and tips and advice as you are writing your teacher resume. So before we get started, please make sure that you give this video a thumbs up if it is helpful to you, subscribe for future videos, and now let's get started. I'm going to start off by showing y'all what my resume as a whole looks like. I did type it up in Word because it was easier to keep track of the margins. And this has more or less always been my formatting for my resumes. I believe I was listening to a teacher coach podcast a little while ago, and there was a resume expert that was giving advice, and the number one piece of advice that she gave was on formatting your resume. I know that probably as teachers we have this specific aesthetic that we like to achieve, but when it comes to resumes, you want to keep it very simple and clean. So I personally don't like the resumes that have kind of like the two columns divided up. So I did try those formats, but I found that it wasted a lot of space. So let's count how many sections I have. I have education, certifications, teaching experience, leadership, and awards. Those are my headers in my resume. And as you can see, I made sure to use uppercase lettering with those, and it's a size 12 and they are also bolded. So when I started formatting this, I start off by going to the layout. The first thing that you want to do when you're designing your format is go over to the margins and decide what your margins are going to be. I did start off with the narrow, but I ended up having to push up my margins. So on this side, they're 0.5, but at the top, I raised it to the top so that everything could fit in one page. So that's the second thing, is to try to make sure that you can fit everything, all of your experience, into one page. If you happen to be a student teacher, or perhaps you are a future teacher, then what I would focus on right now is finding a local classroom, a local school where you can volunteer. I know that it can be time consuming with having to take other classes and finding time in your schedule, but if you can find one classroom that you can volunteer in consistently, even if it's just once a week, I think that will help tremendously, especially if you really stick to it and ask that teacher to give you some responsibilities, whether it's small group, whether it's prepping work for them. I am so sure that y'all can find a teacher that is willing to let you volunteer in their classrooms. There's always a ton to do. So at the top, I wrote my name in uppercase letters. It is size 36, and I did bold my last name. Then I went over to shapes and I inserted this line here. If you go over to shape format, shape outline, weight or the thickness of this line is 3 points. And right at the bottom, I included my personal information such as my address, my email address, and my phone number. And one little trick when you're doing the line spaces are that you can add or remove a space before or after a paragraph. So that's what I ended up doing, so that I would only leave a single space in between my sections. Let me start with this line. Some teachers like to include their philosophy, but I find that that can be pretty long. So I tried to think of a sentence that really encapsulated what I wanted in a teaching position. I picked 3 words to describe myself: energetic, organized, and highly qualified. I am an educator and I am seeking to join a harmonious and hardworking team, and that is incredibly important to me. I have been at my school for 6 years and all of my teammates have been phenomenal, and I have heard horror stories from my teammates of previous principals or previous teams that did not work well together. It's very important to be a part of an actual team that helps each other and is not going to put each other down. And if you have a hardworking team, then you can really improve your teacher performance. Teachers are lifelong learners, so we are constantly learning from other teachers. And consequently, if you are improving yourself, you're going to increase student achievement. So that is my quick sentence. Then let's go on to education. I listed the college that I went to. When I graduated with a Bachelor's of Arts in Spanish, and I also went through the elementary education program. As far as my certifications in Texas, I am certified early childhood through 6th grade, and then I have an ESL supplemental certification as well. Now for my teaching experience, I made sure to list my most recent teaching position has been as a kinder ESL teacher. And you can see that I formatted that title a size 9. I kept it bolded. And then for the elementary school name, I left that in italics along with the independent school district that it belongs to. And then I also wrote the date that I was in this position. My most recent teaching experience, I wanted to highlight 5 things that I did really well. And then for the other teaching positions, I highlighted 3 things that I thought I did very well in those positions. So the first thing that I included in my kindergarten ESL position is planning and implementing lesson plans aligned with the kindergarten TEKS and sheltered instruction strategies. My next point is evaluated various testing data results, anecdotal notes. My next line is evaluated various testing data results and anecdotal notes to monitor and modify instructions such as skill-based work centers tailored to student needs. So that's just a fancy way of saying that I am looking at different types of data along with my own anecdotal notes to make decisions for my students. And the primary way that I differentiated instruction was during their independent work time. I was making sure that each student was working on the skills that they had not mastered yet. My next point, I really wanted to highlight that I created my own teaching materials and resources using PowerPoint to aid in student learning. A lot of the time, I don't have what I need to teach my students, so I've learned to create my own resources. The next point was highlighting some pretty rigorous professional development that I've completed, and that is the Texas Reading Academies as well as a dyslexia training, and I learned some fantastic things. And lastly, I wanted to highlight my instructional practice. So as teachers, we know that we get observed throughout the school year, and I do pretty well with my observations, and I just wanted to highlight that. I taught pre-K at the same school for 3 years, and my planning was a little bit different because we did integrate our content because it was thematic learning, and I absolutely loved that. And we also had different objectives. We followed the Texas pre-kindergarten guidelines, and I've always worked with a very large population of English language learners. So differentiating for my English language learners is something that I've done very well. And lastly, I want to highlight my instructional practice rating again. And my first teaching position was as a Head Start teacher. So I listed 3 things that I did as a Head Start teacher. I collaborated very well in a Spanish dual language classroom, and that was actually a pre-K3 classroom. And one of my monthly duties was to document the progress of each child in different areas of learning. And lastly, I had very strong relationships and communications with parents, mainly face-to-face, but I also conducted home visits throughout the school year. So now we are going to go into leadership. And in these leadership positions, I made sure to highlight a lot of strong verbs. And I pulled these out directly from the position that I was applying for. So I looked through all of the duties, everything that they wanted. And again, I tried to put my most recent experience at the top. This past school year, I did serve as the grade level chair, the team leader for my team. So I was responsible for managing our weekly planning learning communities. And we were a team of 5 not including myself. And I had a couple of new teammates join our group, so I needed to make sure that I assisted them, any questions that they had on how to set up their classroom, any specific instructional strategies, and recommending professional development are some things that I did. Now, as a pre-K grade level chair, I feel like I had even more on my plate because we collaborated with Head Start teachers. So I was still responsible for managing our weekly meetings and as well as collaborating with my own team of 5 ISD teachers and 6 Head Start teachers, plus the Head Start supervisor and the Head Start family development worker. So it was a pretty big team, and I wanted to highlight that I was capable of managing such a large team. I also planned field trips for our grade level and special school events, and part of my duty was also to participate in monthly lead teacher meetings and trainings. My next leadership role that I highlighted was being a campus mentor, and my first time doing that was in the 2019-2020 school year, and then this past school year I was a mentor again. So as a campus mentor, I observed instructional practices and provided feedback. I modeled instructional practices and assisted with creating an age-appropriate classroom environment. That's one of my favorite things to do. It's helping other teachers set up their classroom. And lastly, making sure that my mentee had access to appropriate professional development opportunities. And the last thing that I wanted to highlight in my leadership was being a presenter in April of 2019. Myself and a couple of teammates, we organized and led a training that was open to anybody in the early childhood department so they can come learn about our unique letter recognition method that helped us achieve the highest test scores in the district during that school year. And lastly, the only teaching award that I've ever received was being nominated ESL Teacher of the Year on my campus. So I listed that as well. When I finished writing my resume, I made sure that I saved it as a PDF. So you go over to File, Save As, and if you click on Word document, you have several options. You go down to PDF and you save it. And that is it for my resume, y'all. I hope that looking at my resume helped you get some ideas on how to format yours and what type of language to include. So again, please make sure to like this video if it was helpful to you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.